we spent probably 2 years writing the Theatre Green Book, and now we're moving on to the Arts Green Book, which is a little bit more broader. And I suppose I wanted to tell you a little bit about it and how it genuinely could be a really, really useful source of information for you, not only to decarbonise your organisations, your buildings, but to also maybe save you a few quid on your energy bills, and obviously that's quite a big issue for people of late. Let's check this moves on. Yeah. So, hands up if you have heard of the Theatre Green Book. Excellent. So I'll whiz through what it is, just to give you a bit of a background and flavour. But it essentially helps you become more sustainable, as I said. 3 volumes are productions, buildings and operations. The productions building I didn't help write, so I won't be as useful, but I do what I can if you've got any questions later on. Buildings one I did help write and did with the operations as well. Buildings is more about, literally trying to get measures to improve your buildings, and there's some really practical, simple, easy wins, don't cost much, as well as some, more chunky things. I'll talk a bit about that in a moment. I've got 15 minutes, right, John? Yeah, give me a shout if I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. And it was funded by Theatres Trust and ABTT, and we've been working with them for a little while, and you can just Google Theatre Green Book and you will find it. It is for theatre industry, but specifically it's written in a way that should be understandable by many, whether you're a facilities manager, CEO, production director, everyone, a 12-year-old kid at school, you should be able to follow it. There's a lot of information in there, but there is an at-a-glance section where if you've got 5 minutes, you can just flick through the first few pages and understand the principles and the concepts behind it. I'll move on. And yeah, it can help you. It offers a framework. It offers a one-stop shop for all things sustainability. It will offer you cost savings, and it will also help you produce a sustainability plan that you could use for your organisation or your building or your productions, whatever area you're interested in, or all 3. It gives some pretty simple solutions, ideas, and we basically combined our knowledge of buildings and sustainability within our organisation, but we've also spoken to the industry and stolen all of your great ideas and put them in one place. So it's actually the industry that fed into this as much as we've fed into this. So in some respects, it wrote itself just by talking to a lot of industry practitioners. Can't see that so well, but yeah, it started back in January 2021. Obviously mid-pandemic, so all workshops were online. Published around November last year, so it's been out there for a little while now. Apparently it's now been converted to Dutch, French, Italian, and a couple of other languages, so we're gaining momentum. It's free, it's readily available for everyone. And yeah, now we're starting to move into the Arts Green Book, which looks more at how we can apply the Theatre Green Book to other types of buildings, whether that be cinemas, dance studios, workshops, libraries. I think there was 9 different categories, so if you're involved in any of those sectors, then look out for the Arts Green Book, which will be launched, I think, in 2 weeks' time, mid next month. And that was commissioned by the GLA actually, so the GLA will probably do big press announcements on that soon. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about each volume, and we'll hear a lot about this over the course of the day, but maybe just to give you a bit of a start for 10. These pictures are fantastic. They kind of, if you could see them, can't quite so much, but they kind of encapsulate everything about the concept of Volume 1 productions in terms of using less materials, recycling materials, but there's a lot more in the productions guidance that expands upon that. And it provides some principles and a framework for production managers and directors to follow. And it uses this wheel where you go round the process from conception of a production through to completion, get out, evaluation, and then feeding back the knowledge. And it uses various touch points like having a group concept meeting at the beginning and discussing some of the principles in the productions volume, and then touching base in various parts of that process to make sure you're on the right track. And there's tons of great ideas which we'll come to in a second. This is essentially you can market yourselves a little bit as a production company and choose a baseline, intermediate or advanced standard that you want to adhere to. And there's lots of insights, tools, particularly around materials and the materials hierarchy, as to how and where you could be more sustainable in your productions. And there's a lot of focus on giving people more time and not rushing things and taking time to be creative about how you can incorporate sustainability into a production, which is easier said than done. I appreciate that. And a lot of people say, oh, I'm too busy to do this. I'm too busy to read the guidance. And that's fine, but I would like to be a little bit provocative and say, in my mind, that kind of says to me that you're not prioritising sustainability high enough. And again, easier said than done, but we can make time for these things if we really want to. And then on to buildings, which is a bit more of my bread and butter. Tons of information in there. I'll skip on to the tool, which is probably the practical, more useful thing that you could go away tomorrow and try out. But essentially, we've used an energy hierarchy principle of be lean, be clean, be green, which you may have heard of. Clean being the fabric and your doors, your windows. Clean being the kits, the lighting that you put into the building. And green being any renewables. And you want to start at the lean bit and do the measures there. And this is a list of all the typical end uses of energy that you'd see in a theatre in rough order of their significance. So obviously, number one, typically it's heating that's the biggest consumer of energy and carbon in our theatres, and so on. So this toolkit lives online. It's available now. Just Google Theatre Green Book and you'll go into the buildings volume and you'll see links to this toolkit. It's essentially a home survey tool, and it tries to take a professional engineer's opinion of what you could do in your building, and it gives you the opportunity to assess your building yourself. And it's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward. It's a free tool, so you have to, it's not perfect, nothing ever is. But essentially what it will do is it will link you through, step you through those categories that I showed you a second ago, heating, lighting, and so on. And you just answer a series of questions. If you know your building really well, it'll take me half hour. If you know your building well, it'll probably take you an hour. If you didn't know your building so well, you might have to go back, come back, ask some questions, maybe take you half a day, something like that. This should be fairly quick and easy to understand. And yeah, you just click on the boxes, you get a series of pretty simple questions. This one's on ventilation and it says, do you have filters to ventilate your space? Yes or no? And then after a series of questions are asked, it will stick an intervention or a suggestion out the back of it. And I'll talk about that in a sec. And then you can use that to create a plan, to create a sustainability plan, to give you a decarbonisation plan, whatever you want to call it, but it's essentially a shopping list of things that you could consider doing for your building. The long list is about 70 different items. The point of the question there is it should list it down to something a bit more manageable, and it will split it up into recommended, things we think you should definitely go away and do, seek advice, which are things we don't know, but if you have a chat with your local building services contractor or your local architect, they might be able to help you out. And a series of things that we don't recommend because of the way you've answered the questions, which is sometimes useful in itself. And yeah, you get a big spreadsheet. It looks a bit different than this, but you get a spreadsheet out the back of it, shopping list of items, and it will give you different columns saying things like how impactful it is, whether it's an easy win, so something that's free or relatively cheap to do, and that could be something you could do tomorrow. It will give you a list of maintenance projects which might cost a little bit more, and then a list of capital projects that are a little bit more punchy in terms of cost. How long have I got? I'm whizzing through, maybe a bit too quick. So, operations is the third and final volume. I should say, on the building side, that second volume is, yes, it will give you carbon savings, but that's the volume that will also give you financial savings in terms of energy savings. And obviously that's a big worry for a lot of people in the coming months. And sorry to the speaker if I've been the typo for talking. However, the third volume, operations, I think that has way more impact in terms of carbon savings. So if your agenda is more aligned to carbon, then I probably would start here. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So there's a process in the third volume. One of the very, very fundamental things that we discussed and realised with the industry was to have a team, to have a green team in your organisation, even if it's only 2 or 3 people, have them on board to champion this, and to get the organisation to help with that and feed into that, so you have a bottom-up approach, but also get buy-in at board level. I think that's really important to ensure that senior leadership are on board with the ride and they're supporting it, they're giving you the time that's needed, even if it's just to carve out a few hours a month to discuss these things. The guidance is split into various sections: front of house, back of house, managing the building, waste, travel, and then contracts and procurement. The last one, contracts and procurement, is probably the most interesting because that's to do with your scope 3 emissions. If you've heard of that concept, and apologies for using a bit of jargon, but if you don't know, carbon emissions are split up into scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and the easy way of thinking about it is scope 1 is the gas you burn on site, if any. Scope 2 is the electricity that you consume on site, and scope 3 is everything else. Just relatively straightforward. But the contracts and procurement is an interesting one, particularly if you're doing a lot of procurement, you're getting a lot of suppliers in. It's really easy win to keep them on their toes and to ask them questions and to add in things like contract riders to make sure they're doing the right thing from a sustainability perspective, and partnering with those organisations that are on that same journey as you. Again, there's 3 standards: basement, intermediate and advanced, that you can align your organisation with, and I think I've got a slide at the end to share. And prioritise. I think a lot of people, I sense, were worrying too much about, should I do this, do I do that, I can't do anything about that. But we were saying just control what you can control. But the things that are out of your control, you could influence them maybe, but don't worry too much about it. Just focus on the things that you can control, and try and prioritise those. This is the framework, what would you call it? It's a guidance document that allows you to benchmark where you are and where you could be. And again, it's set up similar to the productions volume, where you can choose a baseline, intermediate or advanced standard. And the columns down, the rows that are shown down the left-hand side, they relate to the things I just mentioned: waste, travel, contracts, back of house, front of house. It gives you a few line items on what you could be doing in each of those. But yes, there's a load of information in the guidance, and yes, it will take you a while to read through it. Just look through at a glance to give you a flavour of what it's about. If you've got a bit more time, I'd go to the toolkit. The toolkit's a really good place. It's online, it should be fairly easy to follow. Really good place to find some great ideas from the rest of the theatre world that we've stolen and put here. Say stolen, shared. Because that's a big part of sustainability, is sharing ideas and information. So some particularly good things is in the general tab there is an indicative contract rider. So you could just copy and paste that, put it on some of your supplier contracts, fill in a couple of blanks, keeps them on their toes, it keeps them thinking about sustainability. There's a Scope 3 emissions audit, which if you're interested in calculating your own carbon footprint, there's a relatively quick way of doing it. I say quick, you're probably going to need a few days to do it, but it's related to finances and your outgoings, and you just match up carbon factors to your finances, so maybe you can get your finance teams to help you with that. And that will give you a bit of a footprint of where your carbon's going, and that will in turn help you go, oh blimey, we're spending a ton of carbon on travel or waste or whatever it is. So it could help you narrow down and focus your attention. Some other good ones, if you've got catering or cafe facilities, there's a food and beverage action plan, and we had a chap in one of the workshops that was absolutely brilliant. He gave us so many great ideas, and so you'll find them in there. So have a look through some of those. There's the last slide. So I'm around all day. I'm more than happy to have conversations, help from any technical way, shape or form I can. So grab me, nab me. I've got my laptop. I could even talk you through some toolkits or bits and bobs out there if you wanted a bit of a point or direction. So yeah, thank you.